It's good to see you all. I felt like I haven't seen you in forever, especially you, Judge Allen.
Yes, it's nice to see you. When the last time, last time I saw you, we were fleeing the Capitol. So
Oh
Yeah,
gosh.
we were running from the coronavirus. Yeah,
absolutely, I have. You know, I haven't been back, Warren.
really.
I haven't been in Washington since March 13th.
So you've been in Florida? Wow, wow. I didn't
I
know that.
I sit in my living room in my robe to hear oral arguments. Honest to God. So
Wow, wow. Well, I guess no complaints from you for that, right?
no, although I wish I would have brought some more clothes. But other than that, I'm good.
Awesome, awesome. Hi there, Miss King. How are you?
I'm doing very well, Mr. Flowers.
Good, good. I'll tell y'all this before everyone else joins in. Dina and I, we were. She was my ADA when I was an officer and detective with CMPD, and I don't think we go undefeated. We did go undefeated, didn't we?
We did.
Yeah, she was really, really good. So, yeah, she was really good. So I'm not gonna give her too many kudos. I hear about it later. Hi, Amy. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing pretty good. No complaints. Just trying to make it. Great, great. Thank you for coming on. I think Professor Dickerson is allowing people to come in within the next minute or two. If you guys have anything for me, just let me know. But in the interim, I'm going to prepare my background that I'm struggling with. um, if it doesn't work, then oh well. We'll
Well,
keep
don't
pushing.
be careful not to become a cat.
Right.
Exactly. That's what I'm working, trying not to do.
My favorite part of that was when the little cat's mouth from the lawyer says, "I'm ready to proceed, Your Honor," and I'm thinking, "No, no, you're not."
No. Oh man. So I'm going to work on this background, and hopefully I don't become the cat. And I'll be right back.
Dina, it looks like you're in the office, huh?
I am in the office.
I'm trying only to go in one day a week.
This is my second day in this week. When
Okay.
I did bumpers. I started with Monday and then I'm going to wrap it up with Friday.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So the it's not going to work for me. So I'm going to keep this background. We have about 13. I want to give it
Great.
maybe another minute or two for some more people to log in. But let's see. Hey, Judge Allen, how's everybody doing? Is Diego still there?
No, Diego left at the end of his term, and he became a public defender, but then he actually is now a law clerk for a U.S. district judge down here for a year.
Oh, okay. Great.
And
Great.
Amanda had a baby.
Okay.
I never saw her. I never saw her pregnant. She became pregnant after the pandemic. I had the baby, and now she's on maternity leave. So
Wow. Well, I have to email her and tell her congratulations. I had no idea.
Just at the end of January.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. Hey, Mr. Conklin, how are you, sir?
Good. How are you all?
Doing pretty good. I'm glad to have you.
Who's down in Texas?
Anyone in Texas?
No. Oh, good. Good.
I'm pretty sure we may have a few students in Texas. When they're able to speak up, they'll probably let you know.
Yeah.
Pretty sure.
Yeah. We have several sentinels down in Texas of our group.
Are they doing okay? Or are they, making?
Yeah. We pinged them all to see if they were okay and needed anything, and everybody said they were fine. They were sheltered and secure and just waiting it out. So.
Great.
So great. Yeah. What a way to start off the year after last year, right?
Exactly. Wow.
So how many people do you think are going to be on the call today?
So right now we have 17.
Wow.
I wanted to give it to at least 11:05, so
Okay.
they can everybody can join on. But right now we're at 17. We
Right.
were expecting between 30 over 30 registered for it. So
Sweet. Yeah, and you're getting along okay?
yes, sir. We had a little bit of snow, but nothing bad. In Mississippi, the weather's usually pretty good in Mississippi, so no complaints.
Yeah. Boy, it's been a while since I've been to Mississippi. Mostly Louisiana, Fort Polk.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's we'll talk offline. I want to tell you what we were doing at the school for the bases in Louisiana. Give you an update. I know I kind of talked to Samantha about it.
Right.
I'll be after this. I want to give you an update. I'll probably shoot you an email, let you know what we've been doing. So we're at 17 people, and it's 11:05. So I don't want to hold you guys any longer. So the first speaker we have is Judge Allen. He's with the Court of Appeal for Veteran Claims in Washington, D.C. I had the privilege of interning in his chambers, where I learned a ton from him. So I wanted him to speak on what his experiences as a judge and I believe you were the associate dean at Stetson.
I was.
Okay, and I'm going to hand it over to him. I'll let people in as you continue, Judge, but you can start.
Well, thanks, Warren, and I'm glad to be with you all today. I'm going to start out with just one pandemic caution, which is this week my internet seems to have been every once in a while going out for about 90 seconds, which doesn't cause many problems unless you're actually talking to somebody on Zoom. So if that happens, I haven't bored with you all, and I'll be back in about 90 seconds. So hopefully it'll last. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of an overview of the Veterans Benefits system and a little bit about the court on which I sit. But I am going to try to leave a little bit of time at the end to answer any questions. And I'll answer any questions you want. So until 1989, veterans were statutorily prohibited from the review of any benefits determinations by the then Veterans Administration. So as was famously said, this was a period in which Congress and the Supreme Court noted that the VA lived in, quote, splendid isolation. So it was literally the only part of the government that was not subject to judicial review. And then in 1989, Congress created what's today called the United States Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims, which essentially provided judicial review over veterans benefits determinations for the first time in US history. So we are the youngest federal court in the United States, and we are a unique court. So there are 9 judges on the court. We are all appointed by the President of the United States and confirmed by the United States Senate. We are an appellate court, meaning that just like other appellate courts, we hear arguments in 3-judge panels. We take briefs, we have a record, we don't have a jury box, right? We don't have witnesses, just like a regular appellate court. Our jurisdiction is both narrow and deep. And what I mean by that is our jurisdiction is limited to the Department of Veterans Affairs. Now you might say, well, one cabinet department, what is that? Well, the Department of Veterans Affairs is the second largest cabinet agency, whether you go by number of people or by budget. Their budget this year is going to top $230 billion. That's with a B. And they have about 500,000 employees. The VA operates the largest integrated health network in the world. It administers all of the national cemeteries you know about, other than Arlington National Cemetery, which is administered by the Department of Defense. And then there are about 56 or 57 what are called regional offices that administer claims for benefits, scattered around the United States. And one of them still exists in Manila, in the Philippines, because we are still getting claims from people who served in World War II, in fact. The department handles about 1.3 million claims for benefits each year. And that excludes medical care, right? So the hospitals are gigantic. We see them in the news. They generate a lot of claims. But if you just think about the benefit side of VA, it's 1.3 million claims of benefits each year. And the array of benefits is stunning. It goes from disability compensation to pension to home loans to insurance to the educational benefits. I'm willing to bet that people on the call right now are getting some benefit administered by the Department of Veterans Affairs. And so it's a pretty massive operation. To give you an idea, a single regional office, the Philadelphia regional office, in 1 year administered over $80 million worth of benefits, excluding healthcare, right, again. And so the court's jurisdiction considers all of that. And so it's a pretty broad thing. We are a fairly busy court because, as I said, there are 9 judges and then senior judges. There are 4 senior judges now who are hearing cases. Last year, we received just under 9,000 appeals. To give you some context, when I became a judge in 2017, that number was at about 4,500. So in a span of just over 3.5 years, our caseload has actually doubled at the court. Now, I said we hear cases just like other federal appellate courts, and that's true. But we also are a little bit unique. I once made the mistake at a speech long ago when I was a law professor of describing the court as being a little bit like a platypus. And what I meant by that is it's almost as if Congress, like God, when he created the platypus, had a whole bunch of extra parts laying around, just slapped them all together and said, well, okay, it's a mammal and it lays eggs, but it'll work. And it does work, but it's unique. The court is a little bit like that. So for example, we are an appellate court, yet Congress provided specifically that we can act as single judges. So overwhelmingly, the great number of decisions that the court renders are rendered by one judge acting behalf on the entire court. Now that's similar to practices in, say, the Fifth Circuit, where you are in Louisiana, in the sense that you issue non-precedential decisions from the Fifth Circuit, but they're still all 3-judge panels, and we can act on our own. In addition, we are the only appellate court in the United States, state or federal, that can certify classes at the appellate level. And that's really hard, because if you just think about that for a second, we can't find facts because I told you we don't have a witness box, but yet we actually, according to the United States Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit, can certify classes ourselves. And we have actually certified a number of classes recently, but we're the only court in the country that can actually do that. And so I said our jurisdiction was narrow but deep. And what I meant by that is we actually handle a lot of issues that you wouldn't normally think of when you think of the Department of Veterans Affairs. So for example, every single claim for benefits from the moment it's filed is subject to the Constitution's due process clause. And so we handle a tremendous number of constitutional issues. There's a case floating around at the court that if the Department of Veterans Affairs finds a veteran incompetent, meaning they're incapable of handling their finances for VA benefits purposes, there's a law that provides that their name has to go on the Brady handgun control list. And so we have a Second Amendment claim about whether that violates the right to bear arms, for example. We also have to get into a lot of law about state law. So for example, I know more now about the law of marriage in Puerto Rico than I ever wanted to know, because we sometimes have to figure out who is the spouse of a veteran. We also have a case now that requires us to figure out whether certain types of benefits are subject to community property law in California, right? So these are just some examples of how broad things are. And that leaves aside all of the administrative law and the normal types of things you'd think about. And Warren asked me to talk a little bit about the role that students play. Well, a lot of veterans proceed pro se, meaning they don't have representation. And so law schools around the country have developed clinical programs that represent veterans. And so when I was at Stetson, I was a professor at Stetson Law School for 16 years. And one of the things I did was start something called the Veterans Law Institute. And one component of that actually represents pro bono veterans, both before the agency and at the court. And my colleague now, a former major in the Army, has taken that over. But there are now between 50 and 75, depending on how you count. You might say, well, you have to be a more specific number than that, but it's hard to count clinics. But there are at least 50 and up to potentially 75 law school clinics around the country that represent veterans. And in fact, two of the cases that have recently been argued before the court, in an en banc setting, that means all 9 judges, two of those cases were argued by law students under our law school practice rule. And so law schools have a tremendous impact here. But also, even if you're not at a place that has a clinic, when you get out into practice, there's an organization called the Pro Bono Consortium in Washington, D.C., funded by Congress through the National Legal Services Corporation. And what that organization does in part is actually provide trainings for lawyers and does screening memos for lawyers to take cases at the court. And what that does is it allows you to, as I like to say, do well by doing good, right? Because you actually get to hone skills. Because you're doing an appellate argument, you're writing a brief based on a record, that is a translatable skill, right? You're learning areas of law that are not just limited to narrow veterans law, but you're doing good in the world because you're helping somebody. And then on the back end, if you win at our court, if you are the, quote, prevailing party, you can get what are called EJA fees, which is Equal Access to Justice Act. Those are not fees that come out of the benefits that you've gotten for a client. These fees are paid by the government if the government loses and their position is not substantially justified. And so you can actually then fund, many law firms actually fund some of their pro bono programs by taking cases at the court, getting EJA fees and putting the money back into representing people out in the community. Right. And so there are tremendous opportunities out there in this field because we provide tremendous amounts of benefits to our veterans. And it is a major deal. So most of the cases I'm hearing now are people from the Vietnam era, but we have people going back to the Korean War. I had a case last year from somebody who was in a Nazi prison camp in World War II. And so the range of these benefits go from people in World War II and their spouses all the way up to the people who are serving now. And so it's a really interesting area. And I do encourage you to get involved because, 30 years ago, there was no such thing as veterans law. And today, it's a really thriving area. And so I'd be happy to answer any questions about that, about the court, about being a judge, something I did not expect would ever happen. So if anybody does have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
So Judge Allen, we do have one question in the question and answer box there at the bottom. I would encourage the rest of you guys, if you want to, if you have a question for Judge Allen, just put in the text at the bottom and I'll read it to him so he can respond. This first question is coming from Victor Benjamin. And he stated that I've served as a reservist for 8 years and I am yet to receive a single benefit as a veteran. I have military-related injuries that the VA refused to recognize because I am a reservist, and I have been unable to use the GI Bill.
Well, so reservists are, so in order to be eligible for a veteran benefit, right, you have to be a, quote, veteran. And I don't like air quotes generally because people use quotation marks randomly, I find. There was an IHOP down here that had a sign that said you could get a 3-quote egg breakfast for $1.99. And I thought to myself, well, if they're eggs, you don't need the quotation marks. And if you need the quotation marks, I don't want it for any price. But I put veteran in quote here because Congress has specifically defined the term. And so, for example, if you are in the reserves, there are only certain periods of time that qualify you as being in, quote, veteran status for purpose of benefits. And so reservists and National Guards are really complicated questions. So for example, in the National Guard, if the National Guard is called up to help in Louisiana today, but they're called up by your governor, they're not considered in veteran status. If they were called up by President Biden, they would be in veteran status, even if they're doing exactly the same thing, standing next to somebody else who's been called up by the governor. So reservists are really complicated. If things happen during the period of when you're on duty, active duty, then most of the general rules will apply to you, but not all of them. So that, for a reserve thing, I would encourage you to reach out to either a veteran service organization or a lawyer who does this, because it's a pretty complicated area.
Thank you, Judge Allen. Mr. Conklin from Sentinels of Freedom, he has a few questions for you as well.
Yes, Judge, thank you very much, Your Honor, for taking the time to join in this panel today. You and I have a mutual friend, Judge Jack Farley, who I'm sure you know well. I've known him for
fantastic.
Yeah,
he was judge number 3.
Yeah.
I'm number 18. So
yeah, I've known him for 20 years. He's been very involved with us. Just a wonderful guy. I talk to him every 2 weeks. He's in poor shape physically, but
I wouldn't bet against him.
Yeah, he's a good guy. You mentioned the pro bono group. What was it called? Pro bono consortia?
Yes, the Pro Bono Consortium. That's actually the name of the group.
Okay, got it. And then a caseload per year, total caseload, what would you estimate that to be?
Well, so the caseload at the court last year was just under 9,000 appeals. But if you go down one level, we review something called the Board of Veterans Appeals, which is internal to the VA. Right. Last year, they produced just over 100,000 decisions.
Okay, got it. And then in your court, how do you handle prosecution? In other words, you get a case that you're reviewing that clearly has criminal elements. Do you refer those to DOJ, or is that not in your purview?
No, we haven't had anything. We don't handle any appeals directly that involve criminal matters.
Okay.
We do have the ability to hold people, including the secretary, in contempt. which we can do. We obviously don't do that very much. For military justice matters, those are appealed to a separate court, literally 3 blocks from my courthouse, which is the United States Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces, right. Which is a court that hears all appeals from the military justice system.
Okay. And then there's been I think there was a case working up towards the Supreme Court regarding the ability for employees of the Department of Defense to sue their employer. And I can't remember the name of the law, but I want
to say Ferris Doctrine.
Ferris Doctrine, yeah. Have you got anything that you could update us on that?
Well, that's an interesting doctrine. You know, that grew out of the Ferris case, which is a case that involved an airplane crash, actually, in the 1950s, and there was clearly some negligence that went on, and the case went up to the Supreme Court. And in the case Ferris, what the Supreme Court said is that essentially both the military, and then in years later that has expanded to circles around the actual military, like, for example, in some contexts, a defense contractor. The court said Congress impliedly shielded them from tort liability.
Okay.
So I think that, you know, just between friends, my guess would be that there's a fairly good chance the Supreme Court could revisit that, because the court now, although people describe this as conservative versus liberal, in terms of this issue, it's sort of how much do you put words into Congress's mouth versus, there's no question Congress could, if it wanted to, expressly say, you can't get tort recovery, right? And the question is, should a court say that? Or should a court assume that if Congress wants to say that, it will say that? The court today is much more likely to say the second thing than the first. But, you know, as my young son, he's now 15 or 16, but what he used to say when he was younger, when my wife and I would be going out to dinner and we'd get a babysitter, I'd say, Noah, are you going to be good for the babysitter? And he'd look at me and he'd say, who knows? And so really, that's the ultimate answer with the Supreme Court, right? You know, who knows?
It's an interesting issue. We have a couple of our sentinels that have been injured by other employees of Department of Defense, and it's really sad. But the other part of it is the largest employer in the federal government is the Department of Defense.
It is now. One of the logics today that could cut against undermining that doctrine, right, would be, so for example, we hear a lot of claims at my court for something that is euphemistically referred to as MST, which is military sexual trauma, but it's actually just rape. That's what it is. And if you think about that, that is something that could be the subject of civil liability through a damages suit. Now, it's barred under the Ferris Doctrine, right? But you can get functionally the same, well, it's not functionally the same. In some respects, it's actually better, and in some respects worse. You can get benefits for that through the VA without having to go and prove the higher standard. Now, you don't get some other things, you don't get a jury and everything. So this notion of stripping away Ferris liability as it relates specifically to government employees is a little bit more complicated, because then you'd end up the situation where then you have to take into account this double counting sort of idea.
Right.
I think it's much more likely that it's going to happen in the context of the defense contractor world as opposed to the actual Department of Defense.
Okay, I see. All right, that's good. Thank you. I appreciate that. And hopefully when I get to DC, when this travel thing lifts, I'll come by and say hello.
Well, you should do that. As Warren, you know, I grew up in a very small town in upstate New York. And so I never in a million years thought I'd end up as a judge. But as Warren will tell you, because I enjoyed having him in my chambers, how can I put this? We have one hell of a view. So As Warren said.
The other thing, Judge, is we do have some of our sentinels, as we call them, in law school, and specifically heading towards veterans advocacy and cases. And it'd be interesting to know if there is an internship program, and I know Warren worked for you, but if I could get that, maybe Warren can send that to me too, is to drive them in that direction.
Absolutely. The court, we are blessed that Congress has given us, each judge has 4 law clerks. and I also take interns. Obviously Warren was an intern. I've had interns from Pepperdine, from Stetson. I have an intern now from Georgetown. Nice. And many of my colleagues take interns as well. And so the court is definitely open to that.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Look forward to meeting you in person someday.
Thank you, Mr. Counsel.
Okay, Judge Allen, you have another question coming from Torrance Burnett. I'm going to read it to you. So he says, first and foremost, thank you for your time and sharing this valuable information. My question is, in your opinion, who lucid is the current definition of service connected, as it is reasonably possible for injuries such as emotional and mental conditions to go undiagnosed, untreated during active service time. Yet a thorough and reasonably inquiry can connect with substantial certainty the presence or onset of the untreated, undiagnosed condition.
So this is going to one of the largest benefits, which is disability compensation. And disability compensation, this concept of service connection, basically requires 3 things. It requires that you have a current diagnosis of something. You have to have something wrong with you now. You have to have a current diagnosis. You have to have an in-service event. So something happened in service. And then there has to be what's called nexus, meaning there has to be a connection between the thing that happened in service and the thing that you have now. Now, first of all, to dispel a common misperception, if you're injured in service, say you're a paratrooper, you jump out of an airplane, you land, you hurt your knee in service, you can be service connected for your knee, you hurt it right then, right? But what if you are on active duty and you're walking in the supermarket parking lot and you fall and you injure your knee? The answer is you can be service connected for that as much as if you jumped out of an airplane. As long as you weren't drunk or on drugs that made you fall, right, which is willful misconduct. It's a temporal thing. It's not I'm doing a military thing, right? It also doesn't require that you're actually diagnosed with something in service. So for example, let's take PTSD. Assume that you see a traumatic event, something that later would qualify as being a stressor, right, under the Statistical and Diagnostic Manual, right? That's your in-service event, the stressor. You today get a diagnosis of PTSD, and then the evidence has to be equal, just equal in equipoise, for a medical evidence to show that the stressor that you had in service actually was connected to the PTSD that you have today, right? And so this is where lawyers become very important, because lawyers are really good at assembling proof, right? Because you have to look at a whole bunch of things, right? You need to get the medical evidence to do this. You need to think about the timing of things that happened. You have to look at the things that didn't happen, right? So if you imagine a life that somebody has that is repeatedly traumatic, say somebody who had childhood sexual abuse before the military, then they have bad stuff happen to them in the military. Then after the military, they see a car accident where somebody is decapitated, and then now they have PTSD. Well, you need to unravel that, because which one of those things caused the thing today, right? So it is a complicated thing, and it becomes even more complicated in other contexts. Diseases that are hard to prove. Some of you may have served in Desert Storm or Desert Shield. Well, you were exposed to a whole bunch of crap in the burn pits. how are you going to be able to show that something that was in a burn pit when you don't even know what it was caused this illness that you have today? Right. And again, this is where lawyers and medical evidence becomes important. And Warren will tell you from hearing the case, from watching the cases that we heard, right? Trying to connect something that happened X number of years in the past to what you have today is complicated.
Thank you, Judge Allen. We have another question here from Ms. Victoria Kelly. She wanted to know if there are any intern or judicial clerk opportunities available in the Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces. And if so, how do we learn more about those opportunities?
So I would direct you to the Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces website. The Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces has 5 judges. They are also appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. They do have law clerks, that's for sure. I don't know how many they have. As I said, we're really lucky to have the same number as, like, if you're on the Fifth Circuit, the Congress provided for us to have 5. I don't know how many law clerks per judge they have at the Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces, but they definitely do. So the Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces has a website, and I would go there, and if there isn't information there, I would encourage you to reach out to the clerk of that court, who's a very nice guy. And I'm sure he can provide some information for you.
Thank you, Judge Allen.
Thanks, Warren.
Anyone else have any more questions for Judge Allen specifically? You can put it in the chat box and I'll read it for you. And once, twice. Judge Allen is a very efficient guy. I was very impressed with the way he ran his chambers. He put out a lot of stuff while I was there. My head was kind of spinning the first 2 weeks at how efficient he was. So you guys, you may want to go ahead and get those questions in while you have them. Because I definitely asked a lot of questions while I was in his chambers.
Well, I'll end by just saying that I really did appreciate having Warren come up. I mean, he represented the Southern Law Center really well. We are a busy place, but we try to be as sort of efficient and pleasant as possible. One of the things that is surprising for those of you who someday might get a chance to be an appellate judge is how truly sort of isolating it is. So I like all my colleagues, but it's basically as if there are 9 separate law firms that happen to occupy the same building. The law clerks have a lot of interaction with one another, but the judges really, we have our little team of the 4 law clerks, the judicial assistant, the judge, and if we have an intern. And so it was great to have Warren as part of that, because he not only really helped out, but he was a great sort of asset to have in our little chambers team. So.
Thank you, Judge. I really appreciate that. Make sure you give everyone my regards.
Absolutely.
Thank you again for participating, and I'll definitely be in touch.
Thank you.
Right. So, Wade, we have questions just popped up. I want to make sure it's not for you. Okay, so you have some more questions, Judge Allen. Sorry, they won't let you leave. So the first one says, what are the skills you value, suggest we develop or look for in interns?
So there are 2 I would say are the most important. Number 1, you have to have good writing ability and analytical ability, because even though in front of my name here it says judge, my real title is professional reader and professional writer. Right? That's what I do, and that's what everybody else has to do, right? And so you have to be able to write efficiently and read well. I know that sounds like a weird skill. So the better you do in school, the better it's going to look for you when you're trying to be an intern or a law clerk. And second, how can I put this? You can't be crazy, right? In other words, you can't bring somebody into this very small knit group who's going to then, pull the oars out of everybody else's hands, right? They might not always pull in the same direction, but you can't snatch the oar from the other rowers. So if you can present yourself as, I've got these skills, get a good writing sample, and I'm a normal human being, you put those two things together, and that's a good combination for an intern.
Thank you, Judge Allen. We have two more questions, and then that'll be it. This Cherry asks, what decides whether an appeal will be heard by a panel or a single judge?
Oh, very, very good. So in theory, there is a standard. In our court, it's called the Frankel standard, which basically says you look at whether there's an established precedential rule on the case that governs you, because if there is already a precedential rule that decides it, you don't need to have a 3-judge panel to issue a precedential decision. You look at whether it's a novel question, for example, whether the outcome is, quote, reasonably debatable. But I'll tell you, for those of you who've taken constitutional law, if you took First Amendment law, there's a very famous case called Jacobellis versus Ohio that has to do with obscenity. And Justice Potter Stewart wrote an opinion that says, in terms of what's obscene, he says, I can't define it, but I know it when I see it. And so each one of these 9 judges, when we get a case into chambers, our goal is we look at it, and the first question we ask is, does it require a 3-judge panel? I tend to see more 3-judge panels than some of my colleagues who don't see them at all, because everybody sort of has their own definition for it. But for me, I principally look at, is it worth the extra time it's going to take to decide this veteran's case to provide a rule that VA has to follow for the millions of claims that come in the door? Because if I issue a decision, it can be the best decision in the world for a veteran, but it only applies to him or her. But if I have a 3-judge opinion that says that, it applies to every veteran. And so that's the thing you're balancing, because a 3-judge opinion takes much longer to get out, right? Just think of yourself. If you have to decide where to go to dinner today, it's easy. You just decide where you're going to go to dinner. If you got to decide with 2 other people where you're going to go to dinner, it gets a little bit more complicated, right? And so that's the balance that you're doing. That's an excellent question, by the way.
I expect no less from Miss Cherry. She's pretty good. The last question is from Ms. Chanel Staten. She asks, in your opinion, is there an intersection between labor law and veterans law advocacy?
Labor law? Well, that's an interesting question. So I don't think that there's a substantive connection between the veterans law sort of writ large and labor law as that term is sort of defined in terms of organizational workplaces and things like that. If the question actually is talking about advocacy, right, then yes, right, because you can be the skills of advocacy cuts across everything, right? It's just a question of figuring out what the subject matter is. And if once you learn that, the terms of being, writing clearly, recognizing the question, all of those, there definitely is a connection. But there isn't probably substantively, although I haven't really thought about that, to tell you the truth. Well, I guess there is one weird connection, which is our courthouse is located essentially across the street from the U.S. Department of Labor. So, I mean, there's that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Judge Allen. I'm going to let you leave now if you want to stay on it. Completely.
Yeah, I'll watch for a little bit.
Extremely busy.
No, I'll watch. Thanks, Warren.
Awesome. Okay, so our next speaker up is Miss Amy Urban. She is an attorney at Mad Mutual, and she is also a mentor through ACP, American Corporate Partners. That's actually where we began our relationship. Amy, she's awesome. I mean, that's basically all I can tell you about her. I mean, I'm going to let her go into it, but she has a background in military, and she really cares about our military and veterans. So I'm going to hand it over to her. And it's all yours, Amy. Thank you again.
All right. Well, it's nice to meet everyone today. My name is Amy Urban. I may look young, but I have been a practicing attorney for almost 20 years. I attended University of Tennessee College of Law, and I was in my third year of law school when 9/11 occurred. And I was in the law school cafeteria when we saw the buildings fall. And I promptly went into my next class, which was called Race and Racism. And we had a discussion about what we were watching on television and why it was happening. And I'm a philosophy minor and a psychology major from Auburn, and so I like to talk about things. And I went to law school to try to help. And listening to Judge Allen, I'm glad I got to hear him go first. He said, "Do good. We need to do good." And people enter law school for a lot of different reasons. Some people just want to make money, and it's a lucrative career for a lot of people. I want to challenge you guys to do good. I started out in Atlanta as a workers' comp attorney. I was a partner at a large law firm here for 10 years, and then I went in-house with AIG. When I was in-house at AIG, I was able to do good. I was able to do pro bono work that I wasn't able to do when I was billing a lot of hours. And AIG has a partnership with American Corporate Partners, ACP. And you can look at it online, acp-usa.org. But basically, ACP is a nonprofit that helps transition military members and their spouses into civilian workforce. So I have a military family. I've never served. Thank you to all of you who have served. But, my family fought in the American Revolution, and I have several, my great-grandfather and my great-uncle were in the Army Air Corps. I had another great-uncle in D.C. who was in the infantry in the Army. He wrote a book, The Men of Company K. I don't know if anyone's read that. My dad was in the Korean War. I heard Judge Allen mention that. And we are actually starting the process of trying to get him, the aid and attendant care because he is 87. But I did not serve in the military. But when AIG posted that they were going to become partners with American Corporate Partners, ACP, and it was a chance to help military members transition into the civilian workforce, I thought, oh, there's an opportunity to do good. So I looked into it and I applied, and it probably took about 1.5 years till I got matched with Warren. They tried to match corporate employees with mentees who are in similar fields or have similar interests. They also have a women's program where they try to assist women veterans and match them with women entrepreneurs and business leaders. Warren was in law school and I was a lawyer. And that was the connection that they needed there. We're both also from the South. So, they're up in New York and they're probably thinking like, oh, Mississippi's here, Georgia's here, good enough. But that's how they matched Warren and I. It was a year-long mentorship, and then they ended at a year. But of course, I feel like Warren and I will continue that indefinitely, even though the program is just the 1 year. But through the program, they try to help veterans transition back to civilian workforce. It's a very hard transition. There's an estimate of 1 million veterans that will transition back into civilian life within the next 5 years and try to find jobs. ACP takes the position that the problem isn't unemployment for veterans, it's underemployment. And that means that they are not finding meaningful long-term jobs. You can come back from active duty and you can find a job somewhere, but it's not a meaningful long-term job where they're recognizing your transferable skills and you might be underemployed. So they try to elevate veterans to a better employment status. They help veterans with their resume, LinkedIn profile, their elevator speech. I don't know if you guys have an elevator speech yet or if you know what that is, but basically that means when you go in for an interview or you meet someone in an elevator, right, you have a canned 1 to 2 minute speech about who you are, what your background is, what your goals are, your mission, etc. And we help work on that elevator speech so that you get in what you need to get in a very short period of time and make an impact when you're first meeting people. ACP helps with networking. You know, when I worked with Warren, we put together his resume and then we kind of targeted what he wanted to do over the summer when he wasn't in law school, where he wanted to clerk, what kind of field of practice he might want to engage in. I connected him with other attorneys in those fields and people that were geographically close to him so he could sit down, have a cup of coffee, and just kind of discuss the law. I also talked to Warren a lot about law school. And, you know, law school is hard. You guys are in the thick of it, and it's hard. And especially right now when it's virtual and, you know, it's isolating, you know, to be virtual and to be in law school. And it's a hard time for people. But it's a really great program if you are a veteran. I'm hoping that some of you guys on the calls are not veterans and you just want to help veterans, you know. I left AIG, so I'm no longer there, but now I work for MagMutual and I'm in-house with them. And MagMutual insures large hospitals, medical providers, doctors. You know, doctors are not supposed to do harm, right? The goal is do no harm. I wish they had some sort of motto for lawyers, but I like what Judge Allen said, do good. You know, I challenge you guys to do good and to try to find some pro bono opportunities going forward. It's really hard, you know, as a new lawyer when you're working in a firm to bill the hours that you're doing if you're in private practice, or learning how to write briefs. We like to joke, learning how to get to the courthouse door. They teach you everything except for how to actually practice law. So if you can, if you can practice law under the third party or the third year law school act, I challenge you to do that. You know, if you can, I'm sure Dina can probably discuss that with you. I don't know if y'all have something like that where third year lawyers can actually practice law while they're still in law school. I challenge you to do that because the practice of law is hard and you can't just go out there and hang a shingle no matter how much you might want to do that. And some people do, but you can't do that without a mentor. So, you know, the American Corporate Partnership Program is very beneficial if you're looking for a mentor. You know, there's an application there online and they'll match you with a mentor that has similar background and interest. I also at AIG was able to do some immigration work. I know nothing about immigration. You know, I'm a workers' comp attorney by trade. Now I'm doing business owner policies, medical licensing board matters, depositions, assist, you know, when doctors are getting deposed, but maybe they don't need a lawyer. EPLI, employment practices, I'm doing some of that too. But, you know, watching the news and everything that was going on 2 years ago with immigration, I decided I wanted to learn immigration law. I wanted to do a, you know, asylum petition. I knew nothing about that, but I challenge you to stretch yourself, to learn something new every day. You're going to be practicing law for a very long time. And I just challenge you to do good. So that's really what I want to leave you with today. Just try to make a difference, try to do good, try to help those around you in your practice.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amy. And I do have a question for you, but before I ask, I want to ask the attendees, if you have any questions for Amy, go ahead and put it in the Q&A box and I'll read it for you. So Amy, for us third year law students that's, you know, going into the job market here in the next year or so, market, what advice or suggestions would you give us, since everything is literally changed and it's now virtual? What advice or tips would you give us going into this virtual market?
So I imagine you guys are going to have a lot of the same troubles that I had coming out of law school right after 9/11. The economy wasn't very good. You know, a lot of my friends were laid off before they even started their jobs. It was a very intense time. I moved down to Atlanta. I was going to move to DC, but because I'm from a military family and because the Pentagon, was impacted on 9/11, I decided to come to Atlanta instead. I was only supposed to stay a year, but I ended up meeting my husband, and the rest is history. But I would just say you can't give up. I was applying for jobs in the times of, resume paper, letters. I wasn't emailing my resume. I was doing a cover letter and a resume and mailing it. And I received a lot of rejection letters, and I printed those letters, and I had a loft in Atlanta, and I put up the letters all over the wall. It looked like wallpaper, right? So I had a wall of rejection. And it just reminded me to persevere, So I would say persevere. It's a hard time to come out of law school. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You can go into Martindale-Hubbell and find where people went to law school. I think everything in life is about networking, unfortunately. It seems like, but if there's a firm that you want to work at, you need to go on to the firm's webpage on Martindale-Hubbell and put in the name of your law school and see who at that firm went to your law school or went to your high school or is from your hometown. I remember one of my best hires at my firm here in Atlanta went to my law school. She was probably 10 years younger than me. I didn't know her. And she sent me a handwritten letter and said, "Hi, I'm Claire. I'm going to be in town this week, of June. And I see that you went to my law school. Can you just have coffee with me?" And I was so impressed by her initiative. It really meant something for someone to reach out like that. And it made me want to help her. So I wouldn't just blindly email someone. I would find a connection and try to network. And, there's 6 degrees of separation with everything. Warren, you did a fantastic job by finding a position with Judge Allen. I mean, that was incredible. You had to really network to get that. So I would just say persevere, hang in there, use your connections, and try to be meaningful when you make those connections. Cover letters mean a lot of things. People don't do them these days. I really dislike getting an email that says, "Here's my resume." Make a connection.
Great. Thank you so much, Amy. I really appreciate it. Do we have any questions from the attendees for Amy? Amy, are you going to stay on or do you have to go?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I'll stay on.
Great. So in case someone have any question, they may put it in the Q&A. Well, thank you again, Amy.
You're welcome.
Somebody posted, "Great advice, Amy. Thank you."
You're welcome.
So next up is Mr. Conklin. He is the CEO of Sentinels of Freedom. I am proud to say that I am a Sentinel, and part of that program is an awesome program. And I know I told you guys this part of the Veterans Law Organization, what the program has done for me, what they represent, and the story behind the program. I'm not going to go into it. I feel like Mr. Conklin is the best one for that, but I'm going to hand it over to him. And Mr. Conklin, whenever you're ready.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank all of you for joining us. And thank you, Warren, for setting this forum up today. I think it's wonderful that we can all actually practically be in the same room talking on Zoom. So just to give you a little brief on Sentinels, my background is land development, real estate, and building. I have 3 sons, all Army Rangers, multiple deployments. I think something like 28 deployments between the 3 of them. My son was wounded, my oldest son, in Tikrit, or Baji, Iraq, April 8th, 2003. Survived, stayed in. Second son also stayed in. So these 3 brothers deployed together often. They chose the military as their path, and 2 of them are now career military officers with over, or military, 1 officer, 1 command sergeant major, both with over 20 years of service. 3rd one now is a trauma nurse in civilian world. But if people ask me what my motivation was, it would be that I had a long relationship with veterans in my community. I am not a veteran. Brothers, father, all veterans, all the way back to the Revolutionary War. But it was my sons that were the big motivation. When my son was wounded, I traveled to Walter Reed. I saw all of these, this was early on in the war, all of these very severely wounded soldiers, men and some women. And I was impressed with the fact that I didn't see a lot of other parents there. And I asked one of the doctors, well, where are all the parents? And he said, well, you know, Mike, some of them can't afford to get here. Some of them can't get off work. But a lot of these young soldiers, they don't have a functional family. And I thought to myself, you know, my son had the advantage of having a very cohesive family. What would these individuals do when they went home? Who would help them? And so we developed a program and started helping 1 or 2 or 5 or 6, and now we're up to well over 650 across the nation. But it's a very realistic program. We are not a treatment program. This is all about education leading to career placement, employment. We grow big ears. We listen to the individual. What do you want to do? How can we help you get there? And we realize, and very early on, we tell them, you know, you guys carry 99% of the water in this effort. We just help you through our network and advice and mentoring. So it's been a very successful, probably one of the highest, if not the highest touch program in the nation. However, we're small. We don't hang out with rock stars or sports stars. We don't buy expensive ads on TV or radio. We are quiet professionals. And to give you an example of the need, about 200,000 members of the military retire each year, either 4-year enlistments or 20-year careers, whatever. Out of that 200,000, 16,000 will be medically retired each year. Out of that 16,000, about 3,000 are retired medically at above 80% permanent disability. So that's the space we work in, is to focus on injured and wounded. Doesn't have to be in combat, it can be a training accident or something like that, but it has to be while performing duty. So we're very effective at that. That is the program. We raise all the money privately. We have never taken a penny from the federal government, even though we've been asked to apply for grants from the VA. We felt that this, early on, our doctrine was this had to be citizen-led and citizen-sponsored. This was our part as citizens, our responsibility. And so that's the way we've operated and continue to operate. So again, there isn't a day that goes by that we aren't solving or helping one of our sentinels with an issue, whether it's a connection. And I'll give you an example of that because we're talking about law. One of our sentinels is in law school, or was in law school, and a part of his degree, a very specific part of his degree, was that he had to take an unpaid internship with a company in their law department. And so he was doing the resume thing, of course, called us, and he had a very specific direction in law, and it's a new area of law, not well known, called space law. Everything to do with missiles, astronauts, everything to do with space. And so we were able, in about a day, through our network, to call some folks. We called a senior vice president at General Dynamics, who's on our board of directors, and he said, yeah, I've got an attorney that worked for me, and now he's the general counsel for Aerojet Rocketdyne. And he's out in California, and I think he might be the guy to talk to. So I called him up, bounced back and forth for a couple of days on the phone. He was traveling. It took about a month. Finally, his secretary called me and said, Mr. Campari will be able to talk to you on the phone this Thursday. He's going to be in the office in El Segundo. And I said, wow, that's amazing, because I'm going to be in El Segundo on Thursday. Could I come by the office? And she said, oh, well, let me ask him. And he said, great, that's fine. Well, I didn't have anybody to see in El Segundo, but it's only 2 hours by air from me. So I flew down and met him, spoke with him around an hour. He hired or gave this young man a internship. They sent him all over the country for 3 months, meetings, high-level meetings, everything else. He went back to DC, clerked for a judge. Now he's an attorney, and he's working in space law. So that's the network you talked about a little bit earlier. Is the networking is very important, and so we lend our network to our Sentinels. Some advice on mentoring. Mentoring is a two-way street. You have to develop trust in your mentor, and the mentor has to have trust in the mentee. It's an equal relationship. If it becomes unequal, it doesn't work. And of course, communication is the key to that. Not just calling once in a while, but really developing a relationship. 75% of the jobs in the United States are acquired by knowing someone. The resume project or process, and I love to tell these stories because they're real, they're true. We had a young West Point guy down at single leg amputee down at Brooke Army Hospital, and he was getting ready to go somewhere. He didn't know exactly where. And I said, well, tell me, what's your dream job? And he said, my dream job is to go to work for Gulfstream in Savannah, Georgia. And I said, all right, let me make some calls. Now, he didn't know at the time that the president of Gulfstream and I had become friends, because Gulfstream is owned by General Dynamics. And so we set up a meeting. We flew down there, West Point graduate, systems engineer, wounded veteran, very smart kid. And within a day, they had 3 of their division leaders talk with him. They all were fighting over who was going to have him in their division, right? So at the end of the day, we sit down with the HR people, and there was 4 of them. And we were just kind of generally talking about the next steps. And one of them said, Jim, the Sentinel's name, Jim, young captain, he said, did you, by the way, have you ever applied to General Dynamics or Gulfstream on our website? And he said, yes, sir, I did about a year ago. And he said, oh, did we get back to you? He says, yes, sir, you did. You sent me a nice email that said, we'll be in touch. And then I see this guy, the head of HR for Gulfstream, look at the other 2 people in the room that were there with Gulfstream HR. And kind of looked at him, gave him a funny look, and I caught it. And so I said, what was that look? And he kind of went, what do you mean? And I said, well, you just looked at your cohorts here with a kind of a funny look. We're all in the same team here. We're trying to do something right, something good. What does that mean? And he said, Mike, we had 15 jobs posted at Gulfstream about 2 years ago. We got 45,000 applicants. There is no way we can process 45,000 applicants, so we hire an outside firm, and they review the resumes, and the cream comes to the top, and then we get to look at the 10 or 15 applicants. And I said, well, how do they know? And he said, well, they use this computer algorithm, and it searches out keywords. For instance, if the guy doesn't have a degree, he's not going to get looked at, and other keywords. And I said, well, what keywords could have thrown him out? Was it, here he is, a systems engineer, West Point graduate, disabled veteran, ready to go to work. What words could have thrown him out? And he said, we don't know. We stay at arm's length on all of that. And he said, we're a federal, we also do federal contracts, so we have rules that we have to abide by. So we stay at arm's length. We don't really know what words might have thrown him out that he wrote in his resume. So the resume mill, in my opinion, what I advise our sentinels is to find a mentor. Find somebody who is in that business, that is successful in that business, and is willing to take some time. You have to make the ask, and you have to be genuine about it. You have to communicate. You have to develop a trusting relationship. So the last thing I'll talk to you about on resumes. The academia, and now the federal government, even my sons in the military, say that they are told not to put their pictures on their resume. Well, I think that's wrong, because I can tell by looking at a person's face who they are. That's something you develop over a lifetime of experiences. I can look at people's faces and listen to them talk a little bit and say, okay, this person looks motivated. This person, so we suggest that our sentinels, they put their military picture on their resume. Why? Because it points to their experience, to their dedication, to their commitment, and that means something to maybe not somebody in HR that's reviewing these applications, but it certainly means something to the person that's hiring. And so it's those are some of the key takeaways that we've learned through this process. There's just so much about it. As for law, I'll tell you, last night I was in a settlement agreement for 8 hours, from one in the afternoon to 7 at night, on a litigation we're involved with on a donation that somebody gave us, and we prevailed. But for a layman, I got to tell you, it was mind-numbing. And I'm so glad we didn't end up in court. So we settled it, and we're on our way. But it's taken 2 years to settle this little stupid lawsuit. So it's attorneys, you're a special breed. I don't know where you get the patience. I want to reach through and grab the other attorney by the throat on the other end of the Zoom, and luckily I have good people around me that kind of hold me back, but it's a gift, I think, that you all have, and that is patience, and of course knowledge. It takes time, just like Amy was saying. It doesn't happen overnight. Practically nothing does. You have to build your reputation, you have to build your knowledge base, you've got to build your relationships and your network, and I don't underestimate the power of the words thank you when you're talking to somebody. Be interested in their lives too, not just what you want, but be interested in their lives. Build that relationship. That's the most important thing in business that I've learned over I went to work when I was 18 years old. I'm 67 now, and those are some of the life lessons that I learned that have been very valuable to us. With respect to law, I guess to tell you right off the bat, I'm a layman. I've only been in one lawsuit in my life, and this was it, this one that we just settled last night. And everybody's got their everybody is granted their day in court, no matter whether they're right or they're wrong, unless it's completely frivolous. And that's the way our system works. And sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But it is the law and the law of the land, and that's what we deal with. Luckily, we don't have to do too much of that. With respect to the VA and the judge, we have never had a problem with the VA because we don't walk into the VA with a big stick and try and beat them over the head and tell them they're wrong and that we know everything. We walk in and say, we've got an individual here that we represent. We're not experts in the field. You are. We'd ask you for some professional courtesy to help him get the help he needs, him or her. And that's always worked well for us. We're not going to change the VA, and nor are we going to try. But what I have found is that there's some great people, wonderful people that work in the VA. You just have to show them the respect that they're due. And if you do that, and it's frustrating in some cases, very frustrating, but eventually, when they understand that you're not there to take advantage of them, they do great things for us. So again, all about relationships. How about some questions?
Thank you, Mr. Conklin. I appreciate it. I did want to tell the attendees, my classmates, that the networking statement you made is very true, because I started with Sentinels of Freedom, who then connected me with ACP, who then connected me to Amy. So the networking portion, and Amy connected me to so many people, I've kind of forgotten a lot of them. But yeah, so the networking thing is very, very true. You guys do great work, Mr. Conklin, and I would like more people to know about you guys and your organizations and even donate. Because
yeah, it is pretty incredible. I have never had anybody come up to us and say you're doing the wrong thing. You shouldn't be doing this. This is this is the government's responsibility. We're very lucky in that our message is pure. It's easy to understand, and people come to us through a lot of different avenues. Some of it I can only describe as hand of God, because somebody will call me and say, I heard about you. I read an article. They're across the country. I don't even know who these people are. Tell me more about what you do. I'm interested. And so we have a conversation, and those people have come through in a really amazing support. So the heart of America is very strong for our veterans and our military. The issue is they really don't know what the military does, the general public, other than what they read in the paper. And they really don't know the whole scope of what veterans do when they come back to our community. They're a huge asset to our communities. And they need to be, that message needs to be sent and talked about more often. And to explain a veteran's psyche. I'll leave you with one last story about one of our veterans down in Texas, John Wayne Walding, Green Beret, Silver Star recipient, single leg amputee. When he got home, he really enjoyed the fact that people would come up to shake his hand and say, "Thank you for your service." And he said, it's not hard to tell I'm a wounded veteran. I wear shorts because I can't dissipate heat very well. I also usually have my Green Beret baseball cap or shirt on. I'm proud of my service in our nation. But he said, after a while, I started to ask myself a question. Did I just give that person a pass who came up and said, "Thank you for your service"? That person goes home and might be saying to his family, "I thank the wounded veteran. Check the box. I did my part." And he said, I got angry about it. Very angry. I got dark about it. I talked to my minister. I talked to my wife. And he said, I looked in the mirror one day and I realized it wasn't these people's fault that I was feeling this way. I had to work on some things. And he said, none of these people, most of them have never seen a wounded veteran. They didn't know what to say. So the stock "thank you for your service" comes out. And he said, I had to change that. And so he said, what I do now is when somebody comes up to me and says, "Thank you for your service." He said, "I reach out, I grab their hand, and I hold on to it. I put my left hand on their shoulder. I look them straight in the eyes with a big smile, and I say, 'You're worth it.'" And he said, "I hope I've made a new friend. I hope I've made this person feel at ease in talking to a wounded veteran. I hope that this person walks away and says to himself, what did I ever do in my life to deserve that young man's sacrifice? And I hope they go back to their community and they do something good for someone else, whether it's a veteran, whether it's a school child, whether it's at their church. I just hope they understand that, we go through life and sometimes we lead a very high quality of life, or we don't think about these things. But John is actually the guy that says, don't underestimate the power of the words, "Thank you." And so that's, and I could probably go through about 1,000 of these stories. We should probably write a book sometime, but I don't have time. So, but thank you again.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Conklin. I have two questions here, one for Amy and one for you, Mr. Conklin. I'll start with Amy. So Amy, Victoria Kelly asks, are there resources you would recommend to improve our elevator speech? Also, should it be personalized to each interview?
So I can send you some materials, Warren, if that would be helpful, if you wanted to share with the attendees after this. Yeah, I mean, there are several available resources for that, how to develop an elevator speech, and it should be tailored to who you're speaking to, because, as Mike said, you got to make the connection. You have to be interested in them. You have to have a personal investment in them. So if you know something about someone, you want to hone in on that and relate to them and go, hey, I'm just like you. I'm from that, I served in the military, or I have 2 kids. You do need to tailor it and be specific and know your audience. But there are some general rules that I can share about how to develop that elevator speech.
Awesome. And when I receive that, I'll share it with everyone on the panel.
Okay.
Mr. Conklin, the next question is from Victoria Kelly as well. I love the citizen-led mission. Could you walk us through how your team grew as the number of mentees increased, i.e., the first essential roles that the organization added in the beginning phases of the expansion?
Okay. What I can tell you is that I often have people say to me they want to start a foundation. You got to realize that I came to this, it was not a profession that I had trained in. I had to learn everything from the ground up. But I had 35 years of business connections. I had friends with deep pockets, and that's how we started it. Developing a good board of directors and then building out from there. We didn't know anybody in Washington, D.C., the VA, or the military, very few people in the military. We had to build all those relationships over the first couple of years. And people, quite frankly, looked at us like we were crazy. And there was a lot of rejection. But we plowed through that. And then the other way to look at the organization, I guess, is that we're organized really in 3 specific areas. We call it MAP: marketing, administration, and program. And so it's a very simple process or organization when you look at it, compared to the things I did in the past, which were real estate development, which, if you have any idea what that is to develop a piece of property in California, we now have to deal with almost 160 agencies for a small development, where 40 years ago you had 5 or 6 agencies to deal with. So very complex. It's not just sticks and bricks. A lot of planning, a lot of understanding regulations, rules, and all of that. Did I answer the question, or did I go off on a tangent?
Ms. Kelly, you could put something in the Q&A box to see, so we can know if your question was answered. And if anyone else has any questions, she said yes.
All right, great. Good job.
And for anyone else, if you have any questions for Mr. Conklin or not, let me know. She said thank you as well, Mr. Conklin, because our next speaker.
All right, excuse me, you all, I do have to bounce to another meeting. I look forward to speaking to you again, and I keep this up, Warren. I think it's a great thing you're doing and a great venue for all of us from all different parts of the country to speak. So kudos to you.
Thank you, Mr. Conklin. I really appreciate it. You have a good day.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.
So next up, we have Miss Dina King, soon to be Mrs. And I figured a smile would come. So she is the Chief Federal Prosecutor for the Western District of North Carolina. But prior to that, she's had a lot of positions. But back when we worked together, she was the Assistant District Attorney, and she's really good. I think we were assigned together. How long, Dina? 5 years, maybe 4?
3.
3? Mm-hmm. Well, maybe you made it seem that long. But either way, she never lost a case. With me, I can't speak for anybody else. But she was awesome, man. So I wanted to bring her on so she could share her experiences with you guys. And so I am going to hand it over to her. Dina, it is all yours.
Perfect. Happy Friday, everyone. And Warren, thanks so much for having me. I'm really delighted to be here. There were 3 different things that Warren and I wanted me to discuss, and that was my experience working with veterans, and then advice and suggestions. So just to give you a little bit of information regarding my background, I always wanted to be an attorney. That's the only thing I ever wanted to do. I attended NC State University and majored in business management with a concentration in human resources, thinking at that time that I wanted to do corporate law. I had the opportunity to intern in a corporate law firm one summer and quickly learned that that's not what I wanted to do. So immediately after undergrad, I graduated from North Carolina Central University School of Law. And while in law school, I had the opportunity to actually intern at a public defender's office. And at that time, I learned that my true passion was in the courtroom. I participated on the trial team where we went around and competed against other law school trial teams. And again, just learned that my comfort zone was in the courtroom as an advocate. So shortly after law school, I returned to my hometown, Charlotte, North Carolina. I started off at the Mecklenburg County District Attorney's Office, which is where I met Warren. Warren was a new police officer and hated being in court. He enjoyed doing police work, but did not like to come to court. And so he and I quickly developed a bond and a friendship where I took it upon myself to train this young officer the importance of court and how your role as an officer does not stop when you make the arrest. But that has led to literally a 15-year friendship at this point based on our connection just from being in court. After working at the DA's office, I then progressed on to the North Carolina Secretary of State's office, where I exclusively for a number of years prosecuted white collar crimes across the state of North Carolina. I would be assigned by elected district attorneys to come into their office and strategically prosecute securities fraud and investment fraud cases. And then in 2014, I moved over to the federal system and joined the United States Attorney's Office in the Eastern District of North Carolina, where my office was primarily in Raleigh, North Carolina. I mean, I was a part of a unit that prosecuted organized crime cases, primarily drug trafficking and gang, narcotics, transnational, international types of organization cases. I did that for 6 years, and more recently, I am now the Deputy Criminal Chief at the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Western District of North Carolina, where my office is in Charlotte, and I supervise a team of attorneys that prosecute the violent crime, the organized crime, the gun, gang, and narcotic cases for the western part of the state. I also supervise an auditor that helps us with our financial investigations that are coupled with drug trafficking. So my entire 15 years in this legal profession has been exclusively as a prosecutor. I can't tell you that while I was in law school that was necessarily what I thought I would be doing, but it has definitely been a rewarding and flat out fun profession and career for me. Um, my experience working with veterans, I'm not a veteran, and so I do appreciate all the service of many of you and the interest from many of you that may not be veterans yourself, but just have a particular interest in serving the veteran community such as I do. At the federal level, we have a host of specialty courts. Many of those courts might be reentry courts or specific drug courts. And in many districts, there is what's called a Veterans Treatment Court. And so before I left Raleigh, I was a part of a team of individuals that were working to establish a Veteran Treatments Court at the federal level. In essence, if you've never heard of a Veterans Treatment Court, the purpose is to assist in connecting justice-involved veterans with resources in a collaborative manner that's designed to address the root causes of criminal conduct. So in essence, that means treating veterans' criminal offenses that may be tied to untreated psychological injuries that may have been experienced from war. And so oftentimes we would see individual veterans that had been charged with various offenses, but there were underlying conditions that may have led to the criminal conduct. And so the purpose of this Veteran Treatments Court would be to address those underlying issues that could help alleviate the need for that person to actually go through the criminal justice process. The Veterans Treatment Program partners with federal court, and so typically those treatment courts are ran and operated by a United States magistrate judge in the district where the court is held. There's support from Veterans Affairs, support from Veterans Justice Outreach Coordinator that assists with many of the resources that are a part of the court program, those resources being housing, medical, community, enrichment support groups, employment or vocational skills. And then there's also support and buy-in from the other federal agencies consisting of the U.S. Attorney's Office, the Federal Public Defender's Office, as well as United States Probation. And so all of these different entities gather together. They may have an individual that's been charged with an offense, and the decision is, what do we do? Do we allow this person to proceed through the normal criminal justice system program, or do we allow them to have access and be entered into the Veterans Treatment Court process, whereby at the conclusion of the court, there sometimes stands that possibility that their underlying criminal conduct, that charge would be dismissed. So there's a lot of different options. This concept of Veteran Treatment Court is not a novel concept. There's over 150 veteran treatment courts at the state level across the United States, with the first one being established in 2008 in Buffalo City. At the federal level, the courts were a little bit slower to be started at the federal level. The first federal court, Veterans Court, was established in 2010, and that court was established in Utah. And so the District of Utah really likes to tout themselves as the first. But there's also federal veterans courts in Chicago, which is the Northern District of Illinois, Norfolk and Newport News area, Eastern District of Virginia, Buffalo, New York, which is the Western District of New York, and then Roanoke, Virginia, which is the Western District of Virginia. So I was a part of the team that literally explored these different courts across our nation and assisted in the research and development of the court for North Carolina. There are two other actual reentry or specialty courts at the federal level in North Carolina, one being a pure reentry court for individuals that have been convicted of offenses that come out and are on some type of post-supervision release and pick up new charges and or new potential violations of their supervision, i.e. testing positive. And so they go through this court as a means to, again, address the underlying conditions. And so at the time that I left, the Veterans Court was still in the process of going through all of the parameters that need to be met in order for it to be established. But I was really pleased that I had the opportunity to travel across the nation to actually visit many of these federal veteran courts and to see how they're implemented, to hear from individual participants that have participated in the court. And they talked about how they were able to access treatment and resources that they had significant difficulty accessing before the treatment. And then just having partners and mentors within the criminal justice system that could hold them accountable, but also didn't throw them away. And so it was a really beneficial court. And so I would encourage each of you to research that concept. There may be such court in your community, and it may be an opportunity for you to actually serve as a mentor for those individuals. You don't have to be a lawyer, you don't have to be savvy in the law at all, but in terms of seeking mentors, they do look to pair people based on what military branch they served, maybe any other special unique, if you participated or served in a specific war or during a specific time period, they would look to pair you with a participant that they have served during that time or that shares some type of experience that's similar to yours. And so that's really an area that you can find your way of giving back to a specific, unique population that needs that support. In terms of advice and suggestions, you've heard a lot of the great advice provided by some of the previous speakers. I'm often reminded that our biggest ways to learn in life are through mistakes and through mentors. And so I definitely agree that if you could find yourself some mentors in this profession that just are there to help provide you with guidance or to just provide you with that listening ear when you need it, that will be really beneficial. The profession is an enjoyable profession, but so often you find people that come into this legal profession either because their family members think that it's cool for you to be an attorney, or many people join the profession by the thought that they can get rich really quick. And so I would encourage you to, one, find something that you enjoy and to look to cater your practice towards whatever that is that you actually enjoy. Again, I've been a federal prosecutor for 15 years. I absolutely love it. Handling cases that are based on drugs, guns, and gangs, I feel like I am really in the thick of real crime. And so no day is the same. Unfortunately, every day I can read the newspaper and see about some criminal development that's occurred in my district. And I'm excited because I know I'm going to get that phone call to actually intake that case. And so that's my passion. That's what I enjoy. But I've met a lot of people that went through the scrutiny of successfully completing law school only to start their legal profession doing something that they absolutely hate. And many of those people end up not staying in the profession, doing something else, or just staying in the profession and not being happy. So I would encourage you to figure out what it is that you enjoy doing. Use your time, your opportunity, if at all possible, while in law school to try new things. Again, you couldn't tell me that I was not going to be a corporate attorney. That's what I thought I was going to do. And I think I was only there a couple days before I soon realized I was not happy in that environment. However, put me in the courtroom, and that's where I really shine. And so use the opportunity to have internships or externships or just shadow some other attorneys so that you get to see what their day entails, and use that as a deciding factor in terms of you knowing what area of law you may want to participate in. Be prepared. There are a lot of attorneys out here. And the one thing that I've learned, especially as I have moved from various agencies and ascended in different leadership positions, is your reputation will precede you. When I transitioned from Raleigh to Charlotte, while I was staying with the same agency, the Department of Justice, I was moving to a completely different city where I would be working with new people. Unbeknownst to me, day one, by the time I arrived, many of the people, whether they were my colleagues, some of the attorneys under me, or even law enforcement, had already connected with people from my previous district to ask them about me. And so already, fortunately for me, there was a lot of good things being said about me, the quality of my work and my passion for the things that I do. And so keep that in mind. People are going to hear about you maybe even before they know who you are. And they're going to develop good and or bad impressions of your work ethic, your character, your ethics, your integrity based on that. My third piece of advice would be to just be mindful of your extracurricular activities. You are joining a profession where we are in fact held accountable for the things that we do, even when we're not in the office. And so just be mindful of that. You know, a lot of people joke all the time and say that lawyers is synonymous with liars. You will probably hear that a lot. But the reality is our character, our ethics, our integrity is always at stake. And it's always something that people of the public and the community hold us to a different standard than they hold other people. And so just be mindful of that. Be mindful of the things that you do, even when you think other people aren't watching. And then my final advice to you would be true to yourself. I am not a Perry Mason. I am not a Johnny Cochran. But I am a very skilled advocate. I'm a Dina King. And when I go into the courtroom, my style is unlike the style of many others. I've never tried to mimic or pretend to be someone else. I can only be who I am. And I've honed and developed that style over the years. I grew up as a young church girl going to church every Sunday, a Baptist church at that, where I was required to do Easter speeches. I was required to lead different special programs, serve as the MC for the Mother's Day program, the do this for the Father's Day program. So speaking in front of large crowds was never something that I was intimidated by. But I've also noticed that my style of presentation and advocacy is very preacher-esque. I can be very animated in the courtroom. I use my hands a lot when I speak, and those are things that I just developed over the years by virtue of being a speaker that learned how to speak in the church setting. And so that's me. Oftentimes I've seen some of my colleagues in their style, and I look and I'm like, I could not get away with that. I've never been the person that fake cries in front of a jury or is able to yell and scream. I know my demeanor and I know my style and what works best for me. And so I would encourage you to figure out what your style is and to be true to yourself. Don't try to mimic someone else. Be you and let you shine through in the work that you do. I wish all of you the best. Being a worker that works at the Department of Justice, there are in fact a lot of veterans that have joined on with the Department of Justice, primarily because many are able to count some of their service time in the federal system in terms of their service time with the Department of Justice as an attorney as well. There are a host of positions that are available with the Department of Justice. You could visit the USA.gov website. You can even put filters and sign up for ticklers where when various positions become available, they'll send you alerts to let you know if potentially you qualify and you can apply for those positions. There are also internship opportunities available at various U.S. Attorney offices across the nation if you're interested in that line of work. Most U.S. Attorney offices have several different divisions, the criminal division, civil division, appellate division, and then most within the criminal division also are broken down even further to the white collar unit, possibly a special prosecution unit, which handles a lot of the terrorism and or child pornography cases. Of course, you're going to have a unit such as mine, which is the violent crime and or narcotic unit. And I think that's the gist of most of the units in the office. But if you have the opportunity to even intern at a U.S. Attorney's office, oftentimes you'll be able to kind of walk around and see the different types of cases that the agency as a whole handles and how we represent the United States in those matters. I do know there was mention earlier about the possibility, Amy mentioned it, about the possibility of people being certified under the third year certification. I agree with Amy on that. That truly gives you some real life experience of what it's like to be an attorney if you're interested in being a litigator. Our interns in our office that are certified under that third year practice literally go to court with us, and they are the ones that speak to the court, they speak to the judge, they represent the United States in our cases. And so it is their case. We don't leave them alone, but it is for all practical purposes their case, and they get to advocate on behalf of that case. And so it's a really cool opportunity for you to get your feet in. If you're the person that says, I do not like speaking in front of people, I know that I just wouldn't do well, I'd still encourage you to try it. Push yourself past your comfort zone just so that you can truly know what you want to do versus what you think you may not want to do. You would be surprised where your interests versus where your skills may actually align. It may be something that you don't think you want to do, but it may turn out to be something that you're really good at. And so follow your passion in that light. I thank you all for allowing me this opportunity to share a bit about my experience and how I got to where I am now. I do a lot of community service. It's important as I see so many people in the criminal justice system to do what I can on the opposite to prevent people from coming to this system. And so I'm proud of being able to do a lot of public service work. I'm in a lot of community service work with many of the organizations that I'm a part of to serve as a mentor to even the youth. So thank you for this time.
Thank you, Dina. I really appreciate it. I know the attendance do as well. That was a ton of really, really good information. Hope you guys caught all that. And if not, I'll have Dina send me an email and sum it up for you. Isn't that right? Shake your head. Yep. No?
I can't hardly hear you for some reason.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can now.
So I was telling them that there was a lot of good information you just shared, and if possibly we can get like a short email to kind of sum it up for those who are interested in those internships and things of that nature. If you could send it to me, I could forward it to the attendees and even to the Veterans Law Organization members.
Yes, definitely.
All right. So are there any questions for Dina or Amy? She's still on here. So if you guys have any questions, put it down in the Q&A. I give you, I guess, 2 or 3 minutes if you guys want to think about whatever questions you may have. And if not, just let me know. Amy, do you have anything else you want to add along with Dina as we wait for any questions to come through?
No, but I thought what Dina said was right on. I didn't think I wanted to be a litigator. And I got the Trial Advocacy Award my 3rd year because I was just trying to fill a class. And then I ended up litigating for 10 years. And I actually much more prefer being in-house and not litigating, but it is a skill that I have. And I have to hold a pen in my hand when I talk because otherwise my hands flail.
How about you, Dina? You got anything else you want to add before we end?
No, I would just say the one warning, and Amy, you might echo this, the one warning I would give you is I don't know a lot of retired attorneys.
Hey, it's really low. Your volume is really low. I can't hear you.
I was just saying I don't know a lot of retired attorneys. Many attorneys practice forever and then just die. So just know that you're joining a profession that really you can make a long-term life out of it.
Great. Thank you guys so much. I guess we don't have any other questions. I don't have anything in the Q&A, but as usual, you guys can send me an email if you want me to forward it to either Amy or Dina or Mike Conklin or even to Judge Allen. You can send it to me and I'll forward it to them for you. We really appreciate you guys taking time out of your busy schedule. You saw that? You see the message?
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Oh, that's too funny. I always say I'm a recovering litigator, but I'm still a practicing attorney.
Great. So, yeah, thank you guys. I really appreciate it. For the Veterans Law Organization, we really appreciate it as well. Professor Dickerson, I believe she's still on here. I don't know if she has anything she wants to add or say. Probably not. Oh, wow. Yeah, that's Miss Cherry, who I was speaking about earlier. She's awesome, by the way. But yeah. So thank you guys once again. We really appreciate it. We want you guys to have a great weekend, okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Great job, Warren.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Hey, Professor Dickerson, are you still over here?